Chag Sameach, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope your Pesach is going well. And I hope that the matzah is not treating you guys too badly. I also hope that the news of the extension of our lockdown is also not treating you badly or causing you too much stress. Please God, will we make it through this on the other side confidently, like we are crossing the sea, and we will see all of our troubles wiped out before us. Please God, may that happen soon in our days. Alright, so we're still in Pesach, right? But our Seders seem to be a thing of the past. I don't know how many of you can still remember your Seders, right? It's been a while ago that we've had our Seders, but we're still in Pesach. Baruch Hashem for that, right? Pesach is great, it's wonderful. Now, I think there's a message in that idea that our Pesach is not just a once-off event. It wasn't just a covenant meal at the beginning of Pesach, but our redemption was a process. In fact, it's a 7-day long process. Pesach is 7 days long. And there's a message in that for us, that we shouldn't be confused by an idea that it's a once saved, always saved. It's not that like that, right? Pesach teaches us that it is a process, and even more than a 7-day process, because 7 represents a full cycle, right? But it goes even beyond that. It goes 49 days up until Shavuot. We've been counting the Omer every day, building up until the receiving of the Torah and the revelation on Mount Sinai. So the whole process of our redemption is being saved from Egypt so that we can make it and do the service unto God at Mount Sinai 49 days later. So we've been counting the Omer, and this is a wonderful message for us to understand during this time where Pesach is still going on, even though we're finished with our Seders. Many people think that Pesach is all about the Seder and that's it. But it goes on, right? There's more to learn. So I hope you guys are counting the Omer every night. Remember that we also recite Psalm 67 with the Omer counting each night, because Psalm 67 has exactly 49 words, so it links up well with the idea of the counting of the Omer, right? And this teaches us a pattern, not just for our redemption from Egypt, but our final redemption as well. That it won't be a once-off thing, it will also be a process, and there will be challenges along the way. We might run into a sea in front of us that we need to cross. We might run out of food, we might run out of water, we might moan a little bit along the way, but we've got to make sure that we, the Afrikaans word is vasbyt, right? We've got to hold on, we've got to stick to it until we make it to the final countdown, right? We need that perseverance to get us through to the end of the redemption, where God willing, we will also be able to experience the revelation of God at the end of this age. May it be soon. I wouldn't mind it right now. Okay. So we are here, right, preparing for the 7th day of Pesach, which is a Sabbath as well. It's a Yom Tov. This year, the 7th day of Pesach falls on a Wednesday. It starts the Tuesday night. So Tuesday night, you guys are all going to have a nice Sabbath meal. And Wednesday, we're going to do no work. Even though you're working from home, we're going to do no work on Wednesday. Those of us that keep the extra day in the diaspora outside of Israel, the 8th day of Pesach, we're going to be keeping Thursday as well, not doing any work. So I wish you guys all good luck in explaining this to your bosses. This weird religion where you keep taking days off. Monday is the public holiday, then Wednesday you've got Pesach day 7, Thursday you've got Pesach day 8. It seems as if you don't want to get any work done. Anyway, so let's talk about the 7th day of Pesach. Our sages connected the 7th day of Pesach with the story of the splitting of the sea in the Torah. Right, it happened on that very day. And that is why it is our Torah reading for this day, the 7th day of Pesach. Furthermore, another thing we do on the 7th day of Pesach during our prayer service is we do not recite the full Hallel. We only recite the half Hallel, because this is the day that, yes, we were saved. It's a day for rejoicing, but so many of God's other creations, the Egyptians, drowned on this day. There's an interesting midrash that talks about how the angels wanted to rejoice and sing songs of praise as the sea fell back upon the Egyptians, but God chastised them and said, how do you celebrate at the death of my creation? So therefore, on the 7th day of Pesach, it's joyous in that we were redeemed, but we are very careful not to celebrate at the downfall of others. What we do celebrate is God's redemption for us, but we don't, out of spite, celebrate the downfall of others. That's a lesson that Pesach teaches us, and specifically the 7th day of Pesach. We even did this at our Pesach Seders. Remember, there's a point at our Pesach Seders where we had to recite the 10 plagues, and we dipped our fingers into our wine, and we put 10 dots onto our plate to remind us of each of the 10 plagues. The reason why we do that little tradition is because wine represents joy. It's got the same gematria as joy. So we decrease joy at the death of God's creation, to remind ourselves to have a bit of sensitivity as well. If you overcome a tyrannical leader or a tyrannical government or regime, you don't hold it against them for the rest of your life, because then you haven't got true freedom. You've still got that in you, right? It's that idea of the Israelites were taken out of Egypt, but was Egypt taken out of them? That's what Pesach Day 7 is about, is that we want to make sure that we forgive those who have sinned against us, and we don't hold it against them. Otherwise, we are still in a type of slavery, a mental and an emotional slavery that we need to be freed from. So we don't hold revenge against others. What does the Bible say? Vengeance is not yours or ours. Vengeance is God's alone. It's His job to carry out vengeance. We shouldn't seek to do it. Alright, so today I want to have a look at a really interesting tradition that came about in Judaism regarding this parasha of today, the splitting of the sea. Right? And since we study this parasha twice every year, and I have to make up a sermon twice a year about the same thing, I'm starting to run out of things to talk about. So today I decided to go a little bit way out there, deep into left field, to try and find something for us to discuss. And I'm going to quote to you a little bit out of mysticism today. So hold your horses, put on your seatbelts, and please don't throw stones at the TV or tomatoes at your screen. Okay, but first I want to give you an outline of what this parasha is about, right? If you remember, we were on our way out of Egypt when we arrived at the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds. And what do? We looked back and we saw there's an Egyptian on my stoop. The Egyptians were running up behind us, and we looked in front of us and there was a sea and we had nowhere to go. Then God performed a miracle for us. He divided between the camp of the Israelites and the camp of the Egyptians, right? He told his angel to go stand behind us, and he took with him a pillar of cloud. And the pillar of cloud was there to separate between the Egyptians and the Israelites, right? And it was darkness on the side of the Egyptians, but on the side of the Israelites we had light, because we had a fire giving us light on our side, so we could see any chometz that was still lying around, or if we wanted to search for some extra matzah ball soup, we could find it at this time, right? So God performed that miracle for us. They say that Moses was the first person in history to use a firewall to prevent an intrusion into the cloud. He was way ahead of his time. Anyway, so then Moses carried on and he prayed, and God said to him, stop praying. This is not a time to be praying. This is a time to be doing something, right? The Egyptians are coming. Lift your staff. And he lifted his staff, and God split the waters of the sea so that there was a wall of water on the right of us, and there was a wall of water on the left of us, right? And we could see into this wall of water, see the fish swimming, the whales and the dolphins doing whatever they were doing, and we could cross over on dry land, right? The Egyptians, however, when they entered the sea, what happened to them? The waves came back upon them, and they were all under the sea. Dun, 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 dun. Right, the poor Egyptians went and drowned in the sea. Okay, now I hope this audio-visual experience that I've put up here for you guys, I hope it worked actually. I hope that it helps you guys visualize the parasha a bit more and, get connected with what we're going to study this week. So, here we go. Here's our joke for the week. As Moses and the children of Israel were crossing the Red Sea, the children of Israel began to complain to Moses about how thirsty they were after walking for such a long time. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't drink the seawater because, of course, the seawater is salt water. But then a fish came up to the wall and spoke with Moses and his family and said, I heard the complaints of your people, how they are thirsty and have no water to drink. Let us make a deal, you and I. I have gills. I will filter this water so that it will come out to you as fresh water, and you can give all the Israelites to drink as they walk by. So Moses thought this is a good idea, but something smells a bit fishy. Right, so he asked the fish, all right, but what is in it for you? And the fish replied to him, he said, this is my demand, that me and my descendants will always be present at your Seder meal. That it would be established as a commemoration of the Exodus, since we were there to help the Jews during the Exodus. So Moses agreed to this. Moses said, we will name you a name that will always be mentioned at every Pesach Seder in the future because of what you did for us. So the fish asked him, well, what is that name? What do you mean you're going to name me after something I did for you? Moses said, we will name you go filter fish. And there you have it. Every Pesach Seder, the fish are remembered because we have gefilte fish at our Pesach Seders. Okay, so today I want to have a look at 3 verses from our parasha. 3 specific verses, because there's a tradition that comes from them, that these 3 verses can teach us something that I think will be good for us during our lockdown. That we can learn something from this week's parasha to help us through our lockdown. You know, it's not easy to be in lockdown and to keep yourself, you know, doing good deeds in lockdown. I saw a guy post something on the internet this week that said he's noticed that he prays a lot better when he has an audience watching him at shul, right? At home, no one's watching him, so he takes all the shortcuts he can, right? And it's true, when we're at home, we're in our comfort zones. We don't have that holiness of the shul, first of all, and the holiness of a minion around us. But at the same time, we don't have, you know, peer pressure to keep us going. So it's very easy to get lazy in our acts of worship to Hashem. So it's a time we need to find as much as we can to help us out and to encourage us that, you know, even though the shul is left over here, we can still bring some holiness into our own houses and continue doing this. Okay, so here's the verse. I'll read it to you. It's Exodus 14, verse 19 to 21. I'm going to try and put it down here on the screen for you guys if you can see it. I hope I'll get it right. If I do, then next week I'm going to be auditioning in Hollywood for a job. Anyway, so Exodus 14, verse 19 to 21 says, "Next, the angel of God, who was going ahead of the camp of Israel, moved away and went behind them. And the column of cloud moved away from in front of them and stood behind them." Verse 20. "It established itself between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was cloud and darkness here, but light by night there, so that the one did not come near the other all night long." Verse 21. "Moshe reached his hand out over the sea, and Hashem caused the sea to go back before a strong east wind all night. He made the sea become dry land, and its water was divided into 2. Okay, so this is the story that I outlined for you earlier, and this is the 3 verses that I want to concentrate on today. Because our sages saw something special in these 3 verses hidden in the Hebrew. Okay, what did they see? All 3 of these verses had exactly 72 letters in them. Exactly 72 letters, all 3 of them. And they thought there must be a reason why there are 72 letters in them. And by the way, since you guys are in quarantine, stuck at home, and you've got some free time, you're welcome to go count the letters and check me out. Do a fact check. While you're at it, go take out a few pomegranates and see how many seeds are inside the pomegranate. Anyway, so when they spotted this and said that something is hidden in here, they derived that an actual name of God is hidden in these 3 verses. That if you put all 3 verses together, you get what is called the 72 name of God. It's 72 names of God found in these 3 scriptures. Right? It's known as the Shem HaMeforash, meaning the explicit name of God. Okay? So these 3 verses combined in a certain way gives you these names. And it's a triads of names. So each name is 3 letters. So I'm going to try and show you guys maybe like that. Show it to you guys on the screen so you can see how they derived it and how they got together of working it out. So they took the 3 verses. The first verse, verse 19, they put it in Hebrew properly, straightforward, like you would read it in the Torah. But the second verse, they put backwards. And in the third verse, they put forwards again. And then what they would do is they would take the 3 letters on top of each other, and they would take that, each set of that, as a name of God. And put them all together, you've got the 72 names of God in this explicit name of God. Right, so it takes a bit of creativity. The reason why, by the way, the first one is read normally, the second one is read backwards, and the third one read normally, is based upon that idea of the 3 attributes of God that gets expressed through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember, Abraham represents chesed, loving kindness. Isaac represents gevura, which is strength or might or power, right, or discipline. And that's why it's backwards. It's because, you know, when we want to experience God, chesed is always the one we want first. Gevura is a bit backwards. That's when we need to return to him. And then the third one, which is represented by Jacob, is tiferet, which is beauty or perfection, right? Which actually encompasses the other 2 together. And that's why you read it back, forward. It's like a way of looking at repentance as well, coming and turning back to Hashem. And by the way, if you're reading into mysticism, which I don't do too much, but the times that I do, you'll notice that our sages are very Trinitarian in their understanding of God. God is always expressed in threes. It's an amazing thing. But anyway, let's get back to the combined letters of these three verses of the name and a certain name that comes out of it. So I want to put up a picture here for you so you guys can see all 72 names of God that we get from this section. Right, those are the 72 names, the three-letter names. And there's a specific name that's derived from this that I want to discuss today. But we need first to stop here and say that this combination of God's names is used in many different ways by many different people. Right? And this should be a warning to you not to, delve into those things, right? Some go into deep Kabbalistic things with it. Some write it down on amulets and use it as a good luck charm with them. It's their four-leaf clover or whatever, right? Some use it in actual magic spells, or when they're trying to chase demons around, they use these names. And they use it for a whole bunch of weird stuff, right? I will not be going into that at all, right? And I'm not interested in stuff like that. But the reason why I want to look at this today is because there's something in that name that can teach us something about God, and it will help us during our lockdown to understand how to connect with God, right? So like I said earlier, I'm running out of things to say, so I went far out on this one. So let's look at this, right? Now, the 72-letter name of God is usually split into two. Why? Probably because we find it at the splitting of the sea, right? If you split 72 into 2, what do you get? 36, right? Check it on your calculators, I hope so. Right, and 36, so you get two sets of 36. Now, there are some seriously spiritual people who live up in the mountain all year long and eat nothing but matzah for the entire year, right? That take the 72-letter name of God and they split it into two, and they write those first 36 on an armband, put it on the one arm, write the other 36 names and put it on another armband on the other hand, and they see this as a way that, God will protect them through whatever they do all day long. So these are some seriously spiritual people that do this. But remember, the number 36 is also a special number in Judaism, right? What does 36 represent? How do you say 36 in Hebrew, by the way? What's the letters you will use? Lamed and Vav, right? Lamed is 30, Vav is 6. So we've got this concept, which is actually mentioned in the Talmud, of the Lamed Vavniks, that in every generation that's ever been on earth, there is always 36 righteous people on earth, for whose sake the world still keeps spinning. If it wasn't for these 36 righteous people, the rest of us would be wiped out. These 36 people provide atonement for the rest of us scoundrels that are walking this earth. It's a very interesting concept, right? And it sounds a bit weird, and you might have your reservations about this idea, but in a way, I actually preached about this 2 videos back. When I spoke on Parashat Tzav, when we were learning about the sacrifices, I also mentioned that we learned from the temple service, the grain offering, that you can take a memorial portion, right? The priest would take it with his 3 fingers like this, and that memorial portion would go onto the altar. And that remnant portion made the rest of the grain offering holy as well. So it's the same concept with the Lamed Vavniks, that those 36 are the ones that sanctify the rest of us. They provide us with a vicarious atonement. Okay, anyway, so let's get back to this name, the 72-letter name. So the sages put together some of our prayers in our Siddur by taking the first name in both sets of 36. Right? So they took that first name in both sets and they used that as a name of God in our prayers in the Siddur. So what are these 2 names? Let me put up the picture again. Hopefully I can highlight it this time to show you that the first name we have of God is Vahu, right? But then if you count 36 and you go over to number 37, the first name in the next set is the name Ani. Okay? And this is a name that we should be familiar with. Think of it in the back of your head. We use this in one of our prayers in one of the festivals. We say, Ani vahu Hoshiana, Ani vahu, save us please. I and he, save us please. When do we do this? At Sukkot, the festival of Sukkot. Remember, we come up here to the front of the shul and we all, with our lulavs and our etrogs, we circle the bima and we do our Hoshanot. And we say this, Ani vahu Hoshiana, saying Ani vahu, which is the name of God, come and save us, please. Okay, so it's a name that we use. So I want to chat about this name a little bit today. On Pesach, of course, we do not use this name. We don't say the name Anivahu anywhere in our prayers. But what do we recite in our prayers when we ask God for salvation on Pesach? The Halal, right? The Halal. The ay. In the Halal, we also ask God to save us. Remember, we say, please, please, oh Lord, save us. Please, please, grant us success. And we've been praying this every morning, right? So it's not the name Anivahu, but our sages teach us that it is similar to that name of Anivahu because the gematria, the numerical value of all the letters, are exactly the same between Anivahu, Hoshiana, and Ana, Adonai, Hoshiana, which we do in our Halal today. So there is a connection between the two. And in fact, the Talmud goes into this discussion, this argument about what they actually said in the temple. Did they say the name Anivahu, or did they do it like we do it today in the Halal? And there's an argument. Each one's got his own idea as to how this happened. And this is because the Halal itself is intrinsically connected with the splitting of the sea. Remember when we studied this earlier in the year, I spoke about that song that they sang, that spontaneous song that they sang, the splitting of the sea? Well, the Talmud and our sages tell us that it wasn't just one song that they sang spontaneously. In fact, the first one that they mentioned that was sung spontaneously at the splitting of the sea was the Halal. The Halal, many of us think David wrote it, but not so. The Talmud goes and points out that we sang the Halal before David was even born. Because we sing the Halal at all three pilgrimage festivals, right? And all times of celebration when we get saved by God. And before David was even born, we had the tabernacle service, and we used to do the sacrifices and sing the Halal in the tabernacle. So tradition says that Moses and the Israelites sang the Halal spontaneously at the splitting of the sea, right? And then David came along later, and he added a few things, and he remixed it, right? He put a remix into it, and then we have the full Halal. So on Pesach Day 7, we don't sing the full Halal, we sing the half Halal, which apparently was spontaneously sung at that stage by the Israelites all together at once. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, so back to the name Anivahu. That name of God has a certain meaning, and I think that is where we're going to find meaning for ourselves in this week's parasha while we are staying in our lockdown. Right? Our sages, more specifically the Tosafot, they tell us that the reason why these two names are joined together, Ani and Vahu, is because it represents God's attribute of sharing in the suffering of his nation. That's what the name Ani Vahu means, that God shares in the suffering of his nation. And you know, there's many names for God in the Bible, right? Each one representing to us a different aspect of his being, right? You've got the name El Shaddai, which represents one thing. Hashem, the four-letter name, represents one thing. The Lord Yireh, that represents one thing, right? But this name, Anivahu, tells us that no matter what hardship the nation of Israel must endure, they will not be in it alone. For God himself shares in their pain. And this is a really cool understanding, a really cool, really amazing aspect of God that we can draw upon in this time of our lockdown, right? But where did the sages get this idea? Did they just make it up, suck it up out of their thumbs? No, they get this from the Midrash. From the Midrash, Lamentations Rabbah, Eicha Rabbah, Pasichta 34, where they actually find two verses in the prophets, one from Jeremiah, one from Ezekiel, where the name Ani and the name Vahu appear in reference to Israel suffering in exile, but also in reference to God himself, where these two names refer to God himself. So I want to read it to you guys, and then you will see. Okay, so this is from Eicha Rabbah, Pasichta 34. It says, rather, this is what God said to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, if you settle here in Judea, I shall go into exile with Israel. Okay? But if you choose to go with them, then I will settle over here. But Jeremiah replied to him, Master of the universe, if I go with them into exile, what can I do to help them? Rather, let their king, their creator, go with them, for he can help them greatly, and I shall return to Judea. So this is based on Jeremiah chapter 40, where God actually gives him the option to decide if he wants to go with Israel or stay in Judea. Now, the Midrash presents a scriptural source to support its assertion that God accompanies the Jews into exile. Right? Thus it is written, Jeremiah 40 verse 1, the word that came to Jeremiah from Hashem. After Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, had let them leave Ramah, after having taken him, bound in chains with all the captives from Jerusalem and Judah that had been carried off to Babylon. And Rav Acha said, the phrase over here, where it says, he was bound in chains, indicates that in a manner of speaking, not only Jeremiah, but God too was bound in chains. What's the word there that he uses? Let me try and put it on the screen for you guys here at the bottom. Hopefully you can see it. Vahu. It's one of those names out of the 72 names that we're focusing on today. So the Midrash is telling us that that refers to God himself also being bound in chains along with us when we were taken out into exile into Babylon. God went with us into the exile. So here's the next verse that quoted from Ezekiel 1 verse 1, right in the beginning of Ezekiel. The Midrash cites a similar exposition from Ezekiel. It says, similarly it is written, it happened in the 30th year on the 4th month, in the 5th of the month, and I was among the exile. Okay? The phrase, and I was among the exile, indicates that in a manner of speaking, not only Ezekiel, but God too, speaking through Ezekiel, was also among the exile. Right? If I put the verse here on the screen for you, if I'm able to, then you'll see that the word used there for I is Ani. Right? And these two together represent the name of God we're studying today. The Ani Vahu. Ani Vahu, save us please. Now, this idea of God going with us into exile is nothing new, right? We know that in Ezekiel, God tells him that when we go into exile, he will be our little sanctuary among us, right? And every time we have a Sabbath table that represents the temple and the tabernacle in our homes. But there's a few more verses that communicate this as well. For example, let's start with Isaiah. Isaiah 63 verse 9. Listen to this. It says, in all their troubles, he was troubled. So God is troubled along with us. Here's one from Psalm 91 verse 15. It says, I am with him in distress. God is with us in a time of distress like we're experiencing now. Check this quote. This is from the Talmud as well. Tractate Megillah 29a says, it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, come and see how beloved the Jewish people are before the Holy One, blessed is he. As every place that they were exiled, the divine presence, the Shekhinah, went with them into exile. For example, they were exiled to Egypt, and the divine presence went with them. As it says in 1 Samuel chapter 2, did I reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt? He did, right? He was there with us, performing the miracles. They were exiled to Babylonia, and the divine presence, the Shekhinah, went with them. As it is stated, this is from Isaiah 43, for your sake I have sent to Babylonia. So too, when in the future they will be redeemed, the Shekhinah will be with them, as it says in Deuteronomy 30 verse 3, then the Lord your God will return with your captivity. He does not state he will bring back your captivity, meaning that he will cause the Jewish people to return, but rather it says he will return, which teaches us that the Holy One, blessed is he, will return together with them from among the various exiles. So every time we get an opportunity to learn a new name of God, we are able to get to know a different aspect of our Creator. Right? At the creation, what name did he use to reveal himself? Elohim. Right? That name of concealment. Later on at the Exodus, when he was performing the miracles with the 10 plagues, what name did he use? He used the holy four-letter name Hashem to reveal his mighty power to save to us. Right? And and that's part of what Pharaoh's issue was. He says, who is this Hashem that I don't know of? Right? And he had to reveal his name to him. And when it came to the seashore of the Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, where we were pinned down, crying out to God for help, he let us know that we are not alone, but that he, Ani Vahu, is with us in our suffering, in our distress. So it's an especially comforting thought that during this particular time in history, right, that even though the world around us is in panic and in turmoil, God is still with us wherever we are within our suffering. Now, he might not be as apparent as you would like, right? You might not be able to see him right in front of you, because there are times when God hides his face from us to teach us a lesson, right? But even though he hides his face from us, he does promise us to never utterly abandon us. He will never completely abandon us, even though sometimes he does hide his face. You know, I've been looking at the reaction of people to this pandemic, religious people, and they seem to fall into one of two groups, right? You're either in a group that, you know, this is the end times, get ready, and you take out your shofar, and you blow your shofar 20 times a day to announce the coming of Messiah, right? And I hear there's people that put up massive speakers here in Fairy Glen that are irritating everyone's dogs, playing the shofar non-stop every day, right? As you're either in that group, or you're in the other group, which is questioning, and this is religious people, questioning, why would God allow something like this? Why would God let this virus spread and kill so many people? Innocent people, old people, weaklings. It's weird. People are asking these questions, right? And it doesn't mean that you doubt God. There's nothing wrong with asking this type of question. In fact, Yeshua himself asked a similar question when he was hanging on the cross just before he died. He said to God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? He also had this feeling that we are asking about God at this time. Why is God allowing this to happen? Right? But there's a lesson we can learn from this, right? That it's a fair question to ask God. Let's be honest, it's a fair question, right? But consider yourself to be an Israelite in Egypt, right? Imagine you were an Israelite back in Egypt. God promised your ancestor, your forefather Abraham, that all of your descendants will have all of this land of Canaan and they will live freely and happily. And here you are in Egypt, a slave to Pharaoh, making bricks. And headline news this morning, Pharaoh takes away all the straw, right? That was the last straw. Imagine how you must have felt. Where is God? Why is he doing this to us? Why is he hiding his face? My God, why have you forsaken me? What did the Israelites do though? Did they just sit and mope around all day? No. The Torah tells us they cried out to Hashem under the heavy slavery, and Hashem heard their cry. We should do the same. We should cry to Hashem at a time like this. Right? Shortly after we came out of Egypt, right? We thought we had the redemption, the Pesach Seder was done. Woo, it's going good. We realized we've got no food. We moaned again and we cried out to Hashem. We have got no food. And what does Hashem do? He sends us heavenly food, manna that literally falls from the sky or comes up from the dew. It's called heavenly food. It's miraculous feeding, right? Talk about feeding of the 5,000. Right? But not long after that, we find ourselves stuck between an Egyptian and a sea. Right? We look back and we see the Egyptians are coming fast. We look forward. There's a sea in front of us we can't cross. What do? We cry out to Hashem. And Hashem answers us saying, Ani vohu. I am here with you in your suffering. I just want to hear you cry out to me. Look what I'm about to do. And he splits the sea and we can walk through on dry land. You know, I kind of get the feeling that God does these things because he wants us to cry out to him. That maybe he sends us suffering from time to time just so that we can call upon his name. You know, maybe this is why he allowed this pandemic to spread to all the corners of the earth. To remind us that even in our suffering, God is still with us over there. Right? We didn't leave God in the shul a few weeks ago and go to our own homes without him. He is with us even in our homes during this lockdown. You know, during the Exodus story, God had to give the Israelites a few miraculous physical representations to remind them that he is with them in their suffering, right? They needed to see things to actually believe it, right? He sent them the pillar of cloud as a physical representation. He sent them the pillar of fire. He sent them food from heaven. He gave them water out of a rock. He even built a tabernacle, a home, and entered it visually through clouds and smoke so that the Israelites could click that God is actually among us. But even more so, the greatest act that God has sent us to show us that he dwells among us happened 1,000 years later in the days of Yeshua, our Messiah, when he sent the Word made flesh to dwell among us and walk among us, to teach us that God is with us. And in which role did he send Yeshua? Yeshua's role in his first coming was the role of suffering. He was the suffering servant on our behalf. God is with us in our suffering. Yeshua suffered for our sake. And you know, it's interesting, when I was reading all these commentaries on the name Ani Vahu, this name of God, I kept coming across commentaries that say, God himself suffers. That God himself also needs redemption. And you know, I read this and I think to myself, what? This sounds like blasphemy. This is God. You can't say God needs redemption or God needs salvation. But they kept saying this. This seems to be something that's believed in Judaism. And I muddled over it a bit and thought about it. And only when I understood how Yeshua represents God's suffering among us did it make sense to me. That Yeshua, a representation of God, walked among us and he gave up his life, suffered until death for our sake, because he wants us to receive the redemption. He wants us to be pure of sin. Through the lens of understanding that sacrifice of Yeshua, we can now understand what they're actually saying in all these commentaries, that God himself also needs redemption and also suffers, also needs that salvation, because God isn't separate from us. God is joined to us, right? We married him at Mount Sinai. We are in this together with him. He does not abandon us. And you know, Yeshua has a bunch of names as well, right? There's a bunch of names for Mashiach. Jesus isn't the only name for him, right? That's his Greek name, by the way. He's got other names that we find throughout Scripture. For example, in the Torah, the Messiah is called Shiloh, right? And that has got a certain aspect to that name of him, right? In the prophets, he's called Tzemach, which is the branch, or he's called Netzer, which is the root, right? Or he's called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, etc., etc. Messiah has also got many various names. But this concept of God being with us in our suffering is portrayed through Yeshua in the name Immanuel. Immanuel, what does it mean? It means God with us. And you know, the gospel writer for the Gospel of Matthew sees this and draws a midrashic connection between that prophecy in Isaiah chapter 7 about Emmanuel and how Yeshua also ends up fulfilling that prophecy of God with us. And that is a function of Yeshua, that he teaches us God with us. You know, it's encouraging to see the whole world at this time, right, on Easter weekend. Everyone is posting things online and sending out things, an email about the hope that we find in the story of Easter, the story of the resurrection. Even our president did this, right? That we can find hope in these troubling times from that story. It's because 2,000 years ago, when the resurrection happened, the message of hope that was spread there to the whole world is something that is eternal. It's an eternal truth that reverberates even till today. And it's amazing that, you know, even though most of Christianity doesn't keep the Sabbath, they don't eat kosher, they hardly even read their Bible properly, even though that's there, the message of the good news of the kingdom is still being used by them and keeping them encouraged and giving them hope in a time like this. That is what Yeshua came and did to this world 2,000 years ago. That we today, from all different aspects of our Christian religion, are still experiencing Immanuel, God with us. When Yeshua came and walked among us. You know, and that's an encouragement we can take during this lockdown that is even more apparent in the next chapter of Isaiah, where he uses the name Immanuel in chapter 8. Listen to this. This is chapter 8, verse 8. He starts off by saying, Immanuel, God is with us. You may make an uproar, peoples, but you will be shattered. Listen, all of you in distant lands, arm yourselves, but you will be shattered. Yes, arm yourselves, but you will be shattered. Devise a plan, but it will come to nothing. Say anything you like, but it won't happen, because Immanuel, God is with us. You know, we quote this verse every single day in our prayers. At the end of the Aleinu, we always have that addition where we quote this verse. We say, have no fear of sudden terror or of ruin that overtakes the wicked. Devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it will not stand. For Immanuel, God is with us. And then we say, when you grow old, I will be the same. Look at the Hebrew there. What does it say? It uses the name Ani Vahu. It's that name of God, that God is with us even when we suffer. Might be missing a vav there. Anyway, and then we go on to say, when your hair turns grey, I will still carry you. I made you, I will bear you. I will carry you and I will rescue you. And I think this translates the message of Anivahu so well, that God is with us during our suffering. Just like the Israelites at the seashore, today we stand with so many variables before us and behind us. Behind us, we've got this virus chasing us. We're trying to run away from it, to avoid it, to spare our lives. But in front of us, we've got all this uncertainty. Where are we going to be at the end of this lockdown? Are we going to still have any job security? What about those of you that own companies? Will you be able to keep your employment? Will you be able to afford it? Will you have to liquidate your company? There's so much frightening things happening at this time. For us, every single one of us in our community. Remember how you guys used to sit here every Saturday? Think who sat next to you. That person is struggling at this time. They've got a lot of fear going through them at this time. But this is not the first time in history it happens. It's not the first time we're suffering. And it's definitely not the fact that God is not here. Because God is with us even in our time of troubling. So what should we do at times like this? What did the Israelites do when they were encountered with these problems? They cried out to God. Because God was Anivahu. He was among us during the time of our suffering. Right? So we should do the same thing. Because God wants us to be redeemed. And He wants to be redeemed along with us. Because when we get redeemed, we glorify His name. So He wants to look after us. He wants to help us out. No matter how difficult it's going to be. And it's going to be difficult. But God is with us. If you've got God with you, you have nothing to fear. So I hope these last few days of Pesach can bring you some comfort. You know, the Baal Shem Tov used to teach that in these last few days of Pesach, including the fact that you would have a meal of Messiah, it's a special time where we can merit a unique revelation of Messiah in our life. So look forward to these last few days. Don't think of it as it's almost time to eat bread again. Look at it as a time where you can encounter the Messiah, where you can find the peace of Messiah, and you can truly experience that role of Messiah as Immanuel, God with us. I wish you all a Chag Sameach. One last thing that I want to add is that there are definitely many in our community that are struggling because of this lockdown. And if you're one of those that doesn't have a financial income or any source of income during this time, please send me an email or a WhatsApp, let me know, and we'll try and help you out to the best of our abilities. And that also goes for the rest of us who do have an income during this time. Think about setting aside more to help out the others in our community that don't have income. There are some that were unemployed even before this lockdown happened that are really struggling at this time. So let's help each other out. At the moment, it's all about survival, right? We don't have to live lavishly, but we've got to help each other out and preserve life. But, you know, that's the thing about Pesach is that we've got to remember that we live by faith. Death doesn't scare us. Nothing scares us, in fact, right? We're living for the Messianic era. And the message of Pesach is that God will answer us whenever we call. So we just keep calling. Chag Sameach.